We're thrilled to be on YouTube. But did they recently censor Gracearchy? Did they suppress another one of our shows? And is Rumble ready for Gracearchy? The Zero Aggression Project, zeroaggressionproject.org, is a sponsor of this show, and we're pleased to present this episode of Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Our world is lost in unnecessary fear and hurt. Our systems seem scientifically engineered to make you small, powerless, and always waiting for the next great leader who will fix the problems around us. Worse, we're witnessing neighbor versus neighbor while warfare breaks out around our family tables. But you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. We're going to be talking a bit weird today because this episode is about deplatforming. You'll notice strange words and syntax because we got struck. An episode got pulled down. This happened with YouTube. We were told there were, quote, violations. Fortunately, I appealed the violations, and the episode was restored within 4 hours.
Yeah, thank God. I'm glad that happened. But I just want to explain, we've been on the Zero Aggression Project. That's been our primary place that we broadcasted through. That's our channel for YouTube since late last year. But we didn't start there. And all of our episodes have been posted at Aho Radio. And that's where this strike happened. And Bill, I think the episode that was struck was the one that we did with Dave Brisbane on, well, we won't say the word, but it's a shot.
Yeah, we can't say the words.
It's the shot, right? The shot, right?
Yes.
And we probably can't describe the industry that it's from either. They have a PH word. It sounds like F, right? Yeah. We probably have to call them Big Shot. Let's call them Big Shot.
Yeah,
right?
We'll call them Big Shot. Yep.
Big Shot. So Big
the
Shot.
Big Shot heard round the world.
So I said something. More than likely, what happened is I said something about the shot, and we made. The thing that was frustrating. We'll put the episode title up in the notes. But the thing that was frustrating about this to me was this was a conversation where two men had made different decisions and were coming to talk about the role of their spirituality and faith and how they carried out the decision. And if you had wanted to come away, and I made some statements about my feelings or opinions in the midst of this, never gave any advice. In fact, I literally said, I have never given advice on this subject, never told anybody what to do. Exactly. And if after you heard these two men who came at this from a different, using the same tools, came to a different conclusion at the time, if you came away thinking that we were giving medical advice, if you came away thinking that we were spreading disinformation, then you weren't watching the show. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can get messed up here. It is possible for someone watching this show, any one of these shows, they've made this remarkably easy, who expresses an opinion that is contrary to the establishment. Notice I didn't say that you said anything wrong. You just simply said something that is contrary to some establishment right now. We will make that case clear a little bit later in this show. But contrary to the establishment, they file a claim. They can review the claim and strike you. That's one method by which this can happen. And the second has to do with the list of dirty words that the great tube of you cannot hear, right? Dirty words, right? Yes. Do you remember George Carlin had 7 dirty words that you couldn't say on the radio?
Right, yes.
Right. Well, we have some words we can't say here today. We're going to have to talk a little bit funny if we want to go through this here, because there's the chances are high with the content that we're going to go over today, none of which is going to take a specific, provide any advice to you on what you should do with your health, that we're going to suffer some kind of sanction, whether it's they turn down the show, which we'll talk about, or they simply strike it.
Yes.
So we are not going to describe the tool that they use to do it. We're simply going to say that Al Gore, the founder of the internet, has rhythm. Al Gore has rhythm.
Al Gore has rhythm. Great Gershwin
Yes.
tune.
So that's the tool that they use. He's a bit robotic, so it works, right?
Yeah.
He comes and he checks us out in the background, runs all the stuff through, and determines whether or not any of these dirty words have been said.
Yes.
So every time you hear us refer to it today, because you're a human being and you know what I'm saying, wink, wink, nod, nod. Every time you hear me saying it, Al Gore has rhythm. Okay? And
Right.
you're going to do this too, right, Bill? We're going to avoid using the word. Listen, if we slip up on any of these words, we're going to go back through and bleep them. Okay? We're going to censor ourselves. Unnecessary censorship will occur here. Okay?
How about the other thing where we were all in home jail for a period of a couple of years?
Oh, that's perfect. We'll call it home jail. Home jail. Let's call it home jail. We won't use the words that people typically use to describe that. We will call it home jail, right?
And it was all because of...
Oh, there was a disease that went around the world. We're going to call that C+.
C+, not to be confused with the programming language.
Correct. C+. You'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So you're leaving out the rest of the word. That's the plus part. Okay. Nod, nod, wink, wink.
Yes.
More.
Yes.
More. Okay. And I have made clear on this show before, I've explained this in all seriousness. There is no such thing as the public's health. No such.
Beep.
Okay. Much less anybody who is an authority, right?
That's right.
Be an authority of said public health. So we won't put those three words in order. They're not going to happen here. Okay.
And how about the big organization?
Yeah, the organization that represents that.
That's very concerned about,
Right. We're going to honor their use of pronoun. They identify as the organization, as an organization. They identify as who.
Who? Yes.
Yeah. Who? Who's on first, Bill?
HU. There's a great metal band from Mongolia named Who. HU.
Yes. Okay. So who? Right? Who. The organization that identifies as who. That's their pronoun.
Okay. Let's come back to this thing about whether you're dialed down or not.
That seems to have happened to us too. So episode 5 of Instant Grace talked about climate. Well, we said the word oh yeah, I know, but
beep.
Yeah, we said the word climate. It's actually a combination of two words. Okay. So what is the thing that you press in the morning when you get up it gets you up to help get out of bed?
Oh yeah, that's the buzzer, the alarm on your phone.
Yeah.
Your
so we're going to have radio. Every time we're going to have to say climate.
There we go.
Right? Climate. Yeah. All right. Are we down? So these are some of our terminologies for today that we have to use because Al Gore, as you know, has rhythm.
Yes.
And we need to make sure that at least, someone could still call and complain. You can still be a real Karen. You can still be a jerk. You can still be anti-freedom. You can still be hateful. And you can still contact the platform and say, you wouldn't believe Jim actually used, he started talking about climate. And so that's what happened here. In episode 5 of Instant Grace, we put two words together, climate and we said that was immoral. We said actually the focus wasn't on, we were very explicit. We actually said that global, temperature changing was real.
We agreed.
We had no problem with that.
We agreed that Al Gore had rhythm, right? We agreed Al Gore had rhythm, right?
In fact, we were not disagreeing with a scientific claim. We were suggesting that hysterical claims that were over the top, claims that were were not moral because they were designed to induce fear. And you can go back. That episode's only about 4 minutes long. You can go back and watch it. But what they did is they knocked our viewership down by 80%, 75 to 80% on that one. It's the lowest rated show now in the history of Gracearchy because we put the words climate and together.
So this frosts my cake, man, because if the Chinese disinformation bots can claim that it was United States messing with the atmospheric conditions that caused the fires in Maui, And it takes Microsoft, no less than Microsoft, to decide that that's bull. What's happened to the average Joe? I mean, do we need to have YouTube running such a herd on Al Gore got rhythm? We can't
No,
suss this stuff out for ourselves? I mean,
no, you can't be trusted with this information. And, you're bringing up a really incredibly important point. So there was a laboratory located in an Asian nation wherein they were doing certain experiments.
I've heard about this.
And we were not supposed to discuss this.
Right.
Right? This is verboten to discuss. Now, it may have happened, but you should simply trust the experts that it did not. And that's the end of it.
Yep.
Now, in a previous episode, which we'll also put in the show notes, we explained who actually was putting out that story, not to be confused with the organization that identifies by the pronoun who.
Right.
Although that organization did endorse it, they did endorse the finding. And on the basis of that, on this platform considers anything that the organization that identifies by the pronoun who we cannot disagree with it. We are not allowed to disagree with their findings. The first step they'll do is they'll put a little label on. And I want to talk about this from my perspective, because I've heard from some people who have said, well, that's a badge of honor. You stood up to the censors. You've done welcome to the club. In fact, I've been banned so many times. Look at me. Okay. But if you're attempting in today's media world to put on a show, the most important platform on the planet right now is the video platform on which we're sitting at the moment, that is well known and goes by the initials YT. Okay? That's the platform that everybody wants to be on.
Yes.
Because it's embedded in your televisions, it's embedded in your computers, it's part of Google, which is the operating system. Most people carrying around Android phones. It's natural or native to that phone. And it is the most common ubiquitous platform. And in fact, it's killing it. And I've been grateful for this. It's killing the regime media. And it's killing event programming. We had to, appointment programming where you sit down and, at 8:00 Eastern, 7:00 Central, tune in to Bill Protzman's, game show of Thrones, it's not that you don't have to do that. Like there's no appointment television left anymore. You can choose stuff and you can find anything you want. And it allows a lot of us, a lot of Americans, a lot of people from around the world to be hosts and bring wonderful information.
The same censors that regulate the FCC of what you can put on public radio and television are now coming for the platform known as YT.
They've been coming for that and all the social media stuff. And in fact, we're going to get into a case here momentarily where we're fighting back and what we learned in that case, because we learned an awful lot in that case. I don't want to get too far ahead on this here. Because what I want to make sure we make clear right now is that this is being on this platform. I want everybody to understand where I'm coming from. I want everybody to feel me for a moment. Just please feel me. Okay. I'm doing a show here. I prepared to bring this material here. I spent an awful lot of time trying to learn and know things and be informed and bring you a perspective. And I'm very, very careful. In fact, I try to practice grace in everything I do and steel man my claims. And I try not to make claims that I cannot substantiate or that I don't have some knowledge about. And if you listen closely to the show, you will see me say or hear me say repeatedly, I don't know something. Or I don't have enough information about this. Or my view on this is provisional. Those are all ways of me saying you should do your own homework. I'm constantly encouraging that. And I have a lot of respect for my audience. So I'm going to keep doing that. I believe that this is the moral thing to do. That's the position of the show Gracearchy. So I'm going to continue to do that. But if nobody's listening, if nobody's watching, then I could sit in a room by myself and keep reading. I have no ability to share what I'm gaining, my time, my value. When you sit and watch the show and you look at the timestamp in the bottom corner and you say, well, that show's going to be 45 minutes long. I'm not sure I'm going to have time. I want you to know that I've spent many hours just to get to that point. Now there's direct show prep. Sometimes that show prep is a half hour. Sometimes that show prep is 16 hours. It varies. It runs across the board, but it's actually the basis of a whole career. Like, if your plumber comes to your house and charges you a certain amount of money, what he's actually charging you for is the expertise he's developed over time. Michael Jordan didn't start shooting the basketball the day that he arrived at the Chicago Bulls. There was a whole type of preparation to get good at what it is that he did. And that time is what I've devoted. So I'm bringing all of that to you and condensing it down into a few minutes. It's a tremendous squeeze and value that you're getting out of sitting and watching the show. And this is true of almost every platform. There are some that are just dialogues, people just kind of sitting around shooting the crap. There's some people having fun and playing games, right? That's a very popular thing. But most programming, by the way, if you're watching comedy on YouTube, the comedy shows put a ton of time. They put more time in preparation than anybody, because making something funny is hard work. Okay. But I'm saying to you, I'm pleading, saying, this is what we do here. And if we can't talk to people, if we can't reach people, there's no point in keeping doing this. So this ends respectful dialogue. This crushes a gracious approach. And in the conversation that I was having with Dave Brisbane, that was about arriving at a gracious position. That was two fellows speaking from their own hearts and their lives about how they processed information. It was a remarkable episode. It's the very kind of thing that we've lost in this country. It's the very kind of thing that people are saying, wait, how come we're at each other's throat all the time? Well, maybe we should look at the initials of the platform on which we're sitting and say, well, that's one reason, because they've decided that if we say something out of line, they should be able to turn us off. If Al Gore walks in the room and says, "Oh, this is bad," then they should strike us and knock us off. If one Karen out there complains about us, they should strike us off. And how dare we question the organization wishing to be identified by the pronoun who? Right?
Well, exactly. Or any other organization that's unelected or not.
And then I want to go one step further and say it's pernicious that one of the things that happens in this process is that they don't take you off. They turn you down. Al Gore looks at what you're doing and says, this is out. By the way, does Al Gore even have any rhythm? Does anybody even know?
He can be funny. I saw him on 30 Rock ages ago. And he had a pretty funny couple of episodes where he's like, "Oh, wait, I hear a whale calling," and he runs off the set.
Okay,
so he's got that comedic timing.
But the device that's doing this gets a lot of stuff wrong.
Oh, totally.
A lot of stuff wrong.
I asked ChatGPT for songs in the key of C, and it delivered some stuff that's patently not even close to being in C major. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. So I'm using the code words here because we're still smarter by far than the AI we humans are.
Yeah.
So Al Gore can't keep up with us. Al Gore might have some rhythm, but it's not really on beat.
It's not really, and it looks for it's a popularity based thing.
Yes. Really, it's about offending some establishment.
And if we're not saying things that are popular, in fact, we might be tipping Al Gore a little bit in the other direction.
Yes.
We're going to get turned down.
And then we get turned down. And the turning down, the dialing down so that we have fewer people seeing the show that would want to see the show.
Yeah, would otherwise be curious.
So we had the episode that we recently did. We do these shorts called Instant Grace, right? They're little short bits. I sit down in front of the camera. There's no theme. You're not sitting there with me. It's just real quick. I'm just going to walk in and say one quick thing and try to be done in under 6 minutes. And this one was, I think, under 4, if I recall correctly. And I was talking about climate, and they knocked that one down by 75, 80%. We know this because we have other ones. We can see what they do. We know what they do. And it's not just a little bit. And I'm offended by, I just want to be clear, I'm offended by, because over the years, people have tried to tell me that it's just, well, maybe people just weren't interested, Jim. Maybe they weren't interested, but we now know better. We now know that this has been going on. Definitely. And I want to make an open call here for transparency on this question. We as platform providers, we as a program should know that they have decided to take this action. We
Yes.
should know exactly why they have decided to take this action. And we should be able to come back and tell you that it's happened to us for sure and why it happened. We should also know, because think about the nature of a policy. And I want you to think about it in the following way. You've got a child and you don't want them to touch hot things. So now tomorrow morning, you wake up, you go in and you slap them real hard and say, don't do that again. They're just getting out of bed. Slap them hard. Don't do that again. Are they going to know that that had anything to do with not touching something hot? Is there any connection there?
I see your point.
We get struck and then we don't get told why, or we get dialed off, and then we don't even get told that's happening. We can't even evidence. How are we supposed to learn what it is we can or cannot say here, what we can or cannot do, under what circumstances? Because the New York Times never, ever, 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 ever has this happen to them, no matter what they say. In fact, they can say climate and zero happens to them. They can talk about C+ and nothing happens to them. They can say the words that we're using home jail for and nothing happens to them. Nothing, because they are the establishment. And so how are we supposed to know what it is we little peons can or cannot do?
This is a really important breach of the Fourth Estate, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're supposed to know.
Great point. Oh, good point. I didn't even think about this in advance. Thank you, Bill. I have taken a case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court on the following basis. On the following basis. I'm so glad you brought this up. That you have an individual right to freedom of the press. You have that right. The First Amendment is explicit and clear that there are a set of rights, and we can tell this because of the way they wrote the document. And every committee that sits around, if you've ever been on a committee that's drafted a letter or worked on a bylaw, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They pore over every word. There's nuance and subtleties, and they try to get it exactly right. They write a mission statement. It's another one. If you've ever been involved in a mission statement or strategic planning, the documents that are emerged, people pore over every word. And when we see something separated by, see something with a conjunction, and or is a separating conjunction indicating distinction, when we see or in there, we can begin to identify that we have two separate things. On top of that, when we see things preceded by a definite article like the, we can see that it's two separate things. The First Amendment says the freedom of speech or the freedom of the press, meaning that these are two separate things. Why are they different? Well, as we described in another previous episode, which, by the way, please make a note, Bill. We should put that in the show notes as well. We went through this entire First Amendment case and campaign finance law, took this case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court because we were arguing that every person has a press. And the issue in press is planned communications that cost money. So technology's advanced. It's not just printing presses anymore. Now we have the ability to communicate like here. And so the tools cost money. My camera right now that I need to replace because it's not quite up to what we need to do here for future. It's one of my plans. That costs money. The ability to have the streaming service that we use to record the show. We pay an annual subscription fee to bring this show to you. These things cost money. Our time costs money. Free speech, you can go stand out in a corner anytime you want, and it's unrehearsed, and you can say whatever you want. That's the right that's protected by speech. The right that's protected by press are planned communications that inevitably cost money. The money, therefore, has to come somewhere, and that's the big issue in campaign finance. Well, guess what? Bill just brilliantly raised another point, which is YouTube spends money. It is a large commercial property. It's huge, and there are lots of people that are making livings on it now. Probably 10,000 people are making livings on it right now, just on YouTube alone. I don't know what the number is. It might be higher than that. And so this is clearly a medium by which planned communication can be done. Some money has to be spent to get the message to you, in other words. Yeah. Great point. Great point. So this is a freedom of the press issue. It brings up another issue closely related, Bill.
We're going to do some definitions here.
Yes. I got this. This is my college dictionary. My grandfather's widow, he had just died right at the beginning of my senior year. This was my graduation gift from her. And this is an old dictionary. And I'm going to the old dictionary because we found words can be redefined very easily with just a tweak on the intertubes. And I want to make sure that we're dealing accurately here. Now, I'm going to look at 3 words. They're all the same word basically, but it turns out that even in this dictionary, sometimes it uses the word to define the word, meaning you got to look backwards. So I'm going to try to do this in backwards order. And forgive me, the print is incredibly small, and I have my lens glasses on right now so I can see the camera and so forth, not my reading glasses. So if you'll give me, please indulge me. To censure, censure, is number 1, an expression of blame or disapproval, and number 2, an official rebuke. I want you to notice the second definition is official, the first is personal. Censor, a little bit longer definition, is number 1, a person authorized to examine literature, plays, or other material and who may remove or impress what he considers morally or otherwise objectionable. So it can be any person, because number 2 is an official who examines personal mail and official dispatches to remove information considered secret or improper. 3, a person who condemns or censures. We already defined censures. 4, one of 2 officials in ancient Rome responsible for supervising the public census and public behavior and morals. So what is censorship? Last word. Number 1, it's the act, process, or policy of censoring. Number 2, it's the office or authority of a Roman censor. And it can also be, there's a psychoanalysis word that's not relevant to what we're doing here.
How old is that?
This is I got this in 1986.
So 86.
Yeah, that's when I was graduating high school. Okay, so definitions have morphed and changed over time, but it is accurate to say that Facebook, and during pre-Elon, and maybe even some now still, I don't know, Twitter.
It's hard to tell.
A host of services and platforms, including the one on which we present this show, censors. They censor. And I say this because some of my libertarian friends, and you know who you are, got very picayune about this definition and said, it's only censorship if the government says it. Well, they did.
They did.
They did. Okay. We're going to get to that in a second. We keep teasing. We're going to go there. We will get to there. I promise. We're going to show that they did. But they're wrong. And the reason I know is I have a dictionary. And the common understanding and parlance of this word, previous to people being partisan and picayune, was that it meant that you were banning or striking other people's ability to speak. And this is not a free market activity. And let me be just really crystal clear about this. There are things that I cannot sit and abide here as somebody who is grace. There's a position for righteous anger. And the position, ironically, is when grace is being crushed, when tolerance itself is being suppressed, when understanding is being pushed aside brutally. And that's what censorship does. Censorship means we cannot talk. Censorship means I'm not listening. I'm sitting here with my fingers in my ears going, la, 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 la. I can't hear you. Instead of trying to understand you. It is the anti-grace. And that's the very time that a whip needs to be picked up and the tables need to be overturned and someone needs to say out loud, this is wrong, and it will lead to greater civil war. And so we can't tolerate it. We have to sit and do a show like this. Now, thank God, Bill, we have an outlet. We, first of all, are on more than one platform. We are on several podcasting platforms. That's number one. Okay. And we've already done that. We've got one more podcasting platform to get on. But thankfully, because of the podcasting platforms we're on, virtually anyone who has a phone can get our show through some streaming service. There's some service out there, some app that they can get because we're on the major platforms. We're on 4 of the 5 major platforms at this moment. That's number one. But now I have to ask, and I can't because of trademark say it the way I want to, if you folks are ready for us to rumble, because this is our debut episode on the Rumble platform. Rumble will not censor us for using the dirty words. They aren't going to treat them like dirty words. In fact, they're going to allow adults to have a conversation. Now, I like that it's called Rumble because it's a lot more rough and tumble over there. And your delicate sensitivities may be impaired. You may have a little bit of discomfort knowing that there's people who disagree with you, who are saying out loud things that you don't like or that you might even find ugly. And I might even agree with you in a lot of cases that they are ugly. But I know that the greater evil is the civil war that is brewing due to the suppression of expression. And that the only healing salve is is much of what we are attempting to do here, Bill, which is to bring grace to the discussion. We need governance by grace. And I am even pleading with YouTube to go to grace instead of attempting to suppress things that you don't like.
This is all a same kind of consciousness, the same kind of consciousness that believes that if you have 51%, you can coerce anybody else to do what you want. The same consciousness that believes that if we can control what you hear and see, then you'll either go into conflict with those people who believe otherwise, or you'll become sheep. It's the same kind of consciousness that believes in conspiracy theories about voting machines and everything else that's a conspiracy theory. And which, by the way, to plug that, have we got a conspiracy theory for you coming soon? And it is one that cannot support human civilization any longer.
No, it's fraying at the edges. The center has stopped holding. It's not that it no longer holds. It's stopped. It's gone. The center's gone. So now, you tried twice to get me to go there. You ready to go there?
Oh yeah, let's get legalistic.
We have proof. We have a smoking gun that the government did engage in censorship. And censorship by the government is especially wrong because the highest law of the land is not any official. And the highest law of the land is not the code passed by the legislature and signed by the president. The highest law in the land is supposed to be the U.S. Constitution. And I have to thank Michael Meharry, a friend of mine. He's with the 10th Amendment Center for this insight. It's not really a Bill of Rights. It's a Bill of Restrictions. There's 9 amendments of the first 10 that are really restrictions on the federal government. There's another one that basically says make a certain assumption about the nature of the rights that belong to human beings. But there's particularly citizens, but persons is the word that's most commonly used in the Bill of what we call the Bill of Rights. I really like this idea of Bill of Restrictions. Bill of Restrictions because the highest law of the land restricts the government, the politicians, the do-gooders, the policymakers, the bureaucrats, the president of the United States. They're limited in what they can or cannot do to us.
And how's that working out for you?
Well, it should mean that they are prevented from impairing or blocking us. And it should mean that on First Amendment issues, they can't possibly censor. It's impossible. Because when I read the First Amendment, it says Congress shall make no law.
So,
and then the word that they use after that, if as I recall, is abridging, which is abridging is such a neat little word that they chose here because it's not, they didn't say they can't bluntly do this. They can't overly do this. They can't they can't pick and choose. Abridging is the tiniest word almost you could have picked. It means that you can't even hint like you're going across the line. Like an abridgment is a minor crossing of a line, right? It's a little carve-out crossing, and they create all these carve-outs for themselves all the time. And they make these stupid, ridiculous arguments in some cases about it. The worst, we're going to have to do a show about this at some point. I swear we are going to have to do a show about this because this phrase, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, is stupid and wrong. It's legally wrong. And I can explain why, but they make these restrictions, they make these arguments or cutouts for themselves, and they use the word abridging. So what that bill of restriction is saying is that Congress cannot do this thing. Meaning there's no money that can be spent towards it, by the way. That's what Congress's primary thing is to do, is to direct money towards certain activities, enforcing this and doing that, right? So they can't direct money. That's their Article 1, Section 8 powers, to direct money to doing these things. And they did. They did. And bureaucrats took money that they got, and they did. And the reason we know this is the Missouri v. Biden case and the Twitter files and the Facebook files.
Yes.
So the Twitter files first. I'm going to say this out loud, okay? I don't know about what Elon is like as a human being. I'm not making a comment. I don't know what he's like to work with or for. I have my ideas. I am not making commentary on that. My claim is simply one thing. Thank God for Elon Musk and for his willingness to buy Twitter. And then, even if he did some things wrong in how he handled this, in your opinion, the fact that we know, thanks to Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and I think there was somebody else who was involved, the information that we now have about what went on behind the scenes at Twitter, and that some of it has subsequently been released. There's been Facebook files too, not just Twitter files, but Facebook files. That was huge. And it was because of that that Missouri v. Biden was able to get standing. Here was a case brought by 2 state attorney generals and the signers of the Great Barrington Declaration saying we have been unconstitutionally censored because of activity, illegal activity. Let's just be blunt about it. This should be a crime, prosecutable, that government officials used their power and their ability to threaten these companies. Yeah, it's a mighty nice company there you've got there, Twitter. Sure be a bad thing if something happened to it. Right? That is a First Amendment violation, and it should be treated criminally. The people who did it should not be allowed to serve in government and should probably face sanction. That's what should happen here. But because Elon did this, there was enough evidence to not get the case kicked out on a standing basis instantly, which is what would have happened. So then they get standing. The case gets opened, and now they're able to depose people and gather still more information. So that deposition caused a whole bunch of stuff to come out at Facebook too, and at YouTube. We've learned things about the relationship that our government, our non-elected officials inside the state had. We also even know that the White House at very moments, and I don't want to let anybody off the hook here, this happened during the Trump White House, and it's happened even more since the Biden White House. But both White Houses have used this power to lean on these companies and say, we want you to do this. And they've been threatening in this manner. They've said bad things will happen to you. They've yelled and demanded, why hasn't this been done already? They singled out individual posts. They worked on a regime where they would get things dialed down. In fact, to the social media companies' credits, every one of them, maybe not the one we're doing the video on here right now, but I know that this happened at Twitter. I know that this happened at Facebook. They thought they were doing a good thing by doing this dial down, that when Al Gore walked by and turned down how many people could see the show, that somehow there's a more gentle way of handling the situation because you weren't actually censored, right?
And this was not primarily it was over C+, but that wasn't the extent of it, right? There was much more that fell under Al Gore's rhythm.
Yes, a great deal more.
And the
great deal more.
Threat of coercion,
Yes, and in fact, the most infamous version of this is, a certain president's son who, I won't say his name because I don't want to set off Al Gore on this one either.
Oh yeah, there was something missing.
Who had a device. He had a device that it fell into some other hands right before the election, right? And that was censored. And Mark Zuckerberg said that they were warned that a story like that was going to come down. They didn't have all the details. They didn't know what the device was. They didn't know who it was. They just knew that there was going to be some bit of Russian disinformation that was going to be done.
Yes.
So you're correct, Bill. It's been much broader than this. And in fact, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, we have a clip here, explains what they were trying, why they brought the lawsuit, the Missouri v. Biden lawsuit, what was at stake and what they were hoping to accomplish. He's talking here to The Hill, a show called Rising. The Hill, the network's The Hill. It's a very, very large internet network that on YouTube. And he's talking to their TV, their morning news show, The Hill here, about the case here for like the next minute and a half or so.
So when I joined Twitter in August 2021, I was immediately put, it turns out, on a trends blacklist. I found out from reporting from the Free Press that Barry Weiss did. I actually got invited to Twitter. I could see in the Twitter database my face next to it said trends blacklist. I put on a blacklist, essentially reducing the scope of a set of people that could see my post. I was advocating for the Great Barrington Declaration, which is a policy proposal I wrote with Sunetra Gupta of Oxford and Martin Kulldorff of Harvard in October 2020, arguing for focused protection of better protection of vulnerable older people and lifting of lockdowns. Earlier in the pandemic, I'd also been censored from YouTube for a video where I was speaking with the sitting governor of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, advising him about the evidence on whether masking children had any effect on the pandemic. I told him correctly, based on the literature, that there is no randomized evidence suggesting any efficacy of masking children. And YouTube took down that video. From the Missouri versus Biden case, what we've learned is that these were not accidents. What happened actually was that the government was pressuring social media companies on setting an agenda for them for who and what to censor. It didn't matter if what they were censoring was true or false. They just was inconvenient to the government preferred policies on COVID. And so I was sort of at the crosshairs of that, but it wasn't just me, Robbie. It was a tremendous number of Americans who, whether they, again, based on true or false statements, it was legally protected speech. They posted it on social media. The government pressured social media to label it as misinformation or to take it down or suppress its reach, even without the people knowing it. It was a direct violation of the American First Amendment, as the Fifth Circuit just confirmed.
So he's basically saying, look, I was censored.
Yeah, and he's outlining the details of it.
And he's outlining the details, which are things that we ought to know.
Yeah, and the Great Barrington Declaration, which I probably shouldn't have even said out loud here. Maybe we should bleep that too, right? I mean, that's how bad it is. I'm kidding. I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but it was dealing with the issue of home jail.
Yeah.
And it was asking something very direct and simple. Can we do science on this? Can we do real, actual, verifiable science on this? Can we have an open, critical dialogue where we do peer review of each other's work? Can we see if we can duplicate the experiments?
Yeah.
That's what it was asking for. And it was saying that that's not the case. This is, I mean, this is such a minor ask. Now, Downsize DC filed an amicus brief in this case. Full disclosure, downsizedc.org. I run Agenda Setters by Downsize DC over there. Downsize DC Foundation is the home of the Zero Aggression Project, the sponsors of this show. Those two organizations were signers onto an amicus brief in that case. We did have a tiny bit of influence on the outcome. And most people, Bill, are labeling this as a victory. They're saying this is good news. We actually dialed back the power of a lot of government agencies, but the court chose to only go after the most egregious stuff and said, essentially you can't threaten or you throw around your state power anymore. You can't demand, you can't insist, you can't dictate. That's what they said. Except they made exceptions. And so one of them is the NIAID. Go ahead.
It's like you can say that so nonchalantly. They made exceptions. They broke the flipping law.
Yes. And the exceptions,
right there.
The exceptions they made were for the NIAID, which is the employer of Anthony, who, the doctor who was very famous during the pandemic. And they said that they could still send information over to correct disinformation, which we'll define momentarily. CISA, which is the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, which goes around the tube looking for all over the place, looking for people to censor. That's what they do.
Yeah, that's their job.
And the State Department, which, by the way, this one's the most pernicious of all, is the State Department to me, because the State Department is routinely engaged in lying and propaganda efforts about the activities of both our federal government and the alleged enemies of our federal government. And they are allowed to engage in campaigns of disinformation. We have been at a perpetual state of war since September 11 of 2001, and they are openly allowed to say that they want certain things turned down or turned up if it's a matter of national security. The national security loophole is so big that you can drive semis through it.
You could drive the NSA through it.
You could drive the NSA right on through. And so I'm really bothered that I don't see this as a loophole. I see it as a gaping hole. I'm excited by the progress we made in this case, but it's nowhere near what was sufficient because bureaucrats and lawyers are both creative people. They're enterprising, and they look and they say, well, when we look at the language, what can we get away with? That's the attitude that will be adopted here.
Yeah. Where's Edward Snowden when we need him here?
And if you need an example, it's, go back to Elon. It's happening right now. I mean, he's being accused of treason for not expanding free Starlink reach to an area where the Crimea, where a planned Ukraine military attack was going to be carried out. And Elizabeth Warren is saying, we're going to have to, mighty fine Starlink you have there. We might have to, take a hard look at that. Right? This is what they do. This is what they do. So I'm nervous. I don't feel as celebratory as Dr. Jay Bhattacharya did in this interview with The Hill. Lots of people, including the Gray Lady, have said they've tried to portray the case as going one specific direction here, but the nuance of this makes it so that it's very hard. It's muddy to say that it actually was. You can't call it significant progress. You can only call it potentially minor progress. Basically, the federal government needs to be more polite in its requests, and several agencies that were making requests have to stop. Okay, so they pick up the phone, they call NIAID, or they call CISA, or they call the State Department, and they can still get away with what they want to do if they can get those departments or agencies to read this creatively and proceed.
Jim, can I flip it around for a second? Because what if it's the agencies that are running the government and not the other way around?
We have to get into that. That's something we have to do whole episodes about. That's coming. Right. That's coming. We have to do whole episodes about that. Yep. There is a shadow government, so to speak. There are people that never leave. They're never term limited away, and they know where the levers are. They know how to get stuff done. Yes.
That's how this got done.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, what we have now, our current situation, and it's gotten sadder than most people realize, is that we knew that they were justifying a lot of their behaviors of late in these social media platforms and here on YouTube. We know that they were justifying their behaviors because they were saying that they were attempting to suppress misinformation, which is false or inaccurate information. It's getting the facts wrong.
According to them.
Well, that is part of the problem. Yes. There are certain things out there that are facts. Okay. But the First Amendment allows you to be wrong. Okay. And the truth of the matter is that most of us are ignorant about things. I will freely confess I see through glass darkly.
You're kidding.
There are things I don't know. There are things I have changed my mind about significantly, meaning I went from error to truth, hopefully. Okay. But I'm a human being. Maybe I went from truth to error along the way, or maybe I went from error to new error, maybe smaller error. Okay, these are our natural state, and this life is a journey. Believe that very strongly. I'm a different person than I was. I'm not in the same stream anymore. I'm in a different place, and I've learned things. And so the process of doing that is to literally go through misinformation.
Yeah,
but being an adult means that we exchange information and we learn from one another. And we have experiences and we learn from those.
Yeah.
And hopefully we are less ignorant. So I don't agree with this justification, but they've added a new pernicious layer now. And this is where CISA and the State Department become especially bad. And that is disinformation.
Disinformation.
Now, disinformation is supposedly information which is intended to mislead or misstate the facts.
This is the Noah caused the Maui fires kind of thing.
Yes. And the irony of disinformation is that you could be stating a concrete, true, accurate fact, but you have not provided enough context, as in you haven't given the establishment case. Now, by the way, are we lacking for sources to find the establishment case? Is it just not out there? Is it buried under some rock that we got to go dig for it? Or is it
No,
ubiquitous? And
it's
I mean,
ubiquitous.
it's omnipresent, right?
Al Gore serves it up more than anything else.
Okay. So now that that's the case, why is it they are so scared of the fact that you could tell the truth with insufficient context? Now, in a humorous level, and not so humorous, in the comedic world, there are parodies, there are jokes that have been told that are designed to, their point is to be funny, that have been docked or removed from these platforms because they represent disinformation. In other words, they did not provide sufficient context to the joke. They didn't ruin the damn joke.
So George Carlin, Exhibit A, and we can
George
poke on
Carlin,
George
Exhibit A.
because he's
Oh my gosh. And people, he's typically thought of as identifying with the left. Holy cow. He would have been all over this. He would have done a set by now. And, we actually do have somebody who's doing that. The GOAT of comedy is doing that now too. Dave Chappelle. And maybe this is where we land on some grace here. Because I actually think the other people that bring grace to these things are the people who shock us, who bring comedy to tragedy, to difficult moments. They help us laugh at the absurd and the painful.
good point.
I think our comedians are some of our best philosophers. And there's some that I have mad respect for. I don't like all of them, but there are some that I have some real mad respect for. And Dave Chappelle's one of them because he is willing to tread where angels fear to go. He goes right in and does it. Now, I'm not asking you to like him. I'm just asking to say that the ability to seize humor out of something that is painful or that is wrong, and to get people to think, I mean, really, really think in some cases. He tells a joke. It's a great joke. It's a great setup about being paid, I think it was $20,000 one night when he was very young for doing a comedic set. And he was in New York at the time, and he had to get on the subway that night with that in his duffel bag. It was in cash. And he said, and I won't repeat the exact line because he used another dirty word in there, but he said that was for the first night he basically unrelated to women, like what they go through every day, because they have a certain piece of anatomy that they're carrying around that men want. Gosh, when he said it, you could feel it. Like as a man, I could feel that. I could understand. And it was a great analogy. Now, it was done through comedy. It was funny, but it was also poignant. I believe we need to have completely the ability to exercise grace. We have said repeatedly, we'll say it again and again, that tolerance is good, forgiveness is better, but grace is that understanding for people that you don't understand, you disagree with, they're of a different aesthetic than you, they're doing things you don't like, and you say, hey, what's your deal? Let's sit down here and have lemonade. And I think these social media platforms that have made me contort language today and invent phrases are actually doing more harm to the social fabric than good by protecting us from ourselves. Let's end this culture of safetyism. Let's treat adults like adults. And let's start practicing an understanding of each other that we call grace.